Welcome to Paint a Beautiful Picture. This is episode number 124. Today we're going to look at perspective, another look. If you go back to June 2nd, you'll find a different video about perspective, but I really want to talk to you about this. Over the past week, I've been with my two grandsons and my eldest son because my youngest grandson graduated from high school. We had this conversation about things when he was a little boy. It's a really long story, and actually, I might do a Saturday session about this so that you have a much better picture about some things in my life. But for 7 years, I had very severe brain damage. And it happened when my grandson was 2. So the person that he knew as his granny was really different for about the first 15 years of his growing up life. And then my brain came back. And so he was shocked because my real self pretty much came back and he did not know that person. So it was very interesting listening to his perspective, what that was like, thinking that he knew me or his experience of me as his grandparent. And then when I got my mind back and things really changed, how that affected him or what he thought about them. It was really an amazing thing for me. It was the first time I heard that perspective out of him. Well, then I had a conversation with my older grandson, who was 6 years old when my brain damage happened, and he knew me incredibly well before. So he recognized the difference between what I had been before and what it was like with my brain damage. And he talked about his perspective. Here's the thing. I showed you a bowl of flowers, and I told you, depending upon where you're standing, everyone in the room does not see the same thing. And so your perspective is what you saw, but it is not all there is. In that 360-degree view, you're maybe seeing 60 to 80 degrees, and those other 280 to 300 degrees are hidden from you. So listening to another person who stands in another place with a different perspective gives you a fuller, bigger view. If you have this, I'm right, don't tell me, I know what I saw, I know what happened attitude, you're going to lock yourself down with limited information. When in fact, if you would listen to others who were there and saw it and had a different view, you will have a fuller picture. That's why I said go back and watch that other one too. All right, so here you go. I want you to get this. You have children in a family. We'll say you have 4 children. And the difference between them is 12 years, all right? So your youngest is 14 and your eldest is 16. They were not raised by the same parents. I want you to get that straight, both as a child and as a parent. Because now you've had 12 years of learning before that last one was born. You will not be the same parent to that child as you were to your older children or your oldest. Here's why that matters. Sometimes older children will say, well, you never talk to me like that. You never let me drive a car that soon. You didn't let me. What about what you said? And you have to look at them and say, I understand your perspective. That was the parent I was. It was the best parent I could be at the time when you were a child. But now I have 12 more years of experience and learning. And yes, I'm certain that I'm going to parent your little sister differently than I did you. You may be angry about that. You may be upset about that. You may play the it just isn't fair card about that. But it's the truth that I'm not the same parent as I was when you were a little kid. Wowee, this is a good thing. It will help your child, especially your older one, gain perspective. That as you grow, as you develop, as you change, you won't keep doing things the same old way. And that is a really good thing. Let's talk about perspective in terms of employment, or for your child in terms of school. When you first began as an employee, we'll say you were an intern and you were under 3 to 6 months of probationary time, and you were nervous out of your mind, and you had no idea what they expected out of you, and you really wanted to do a great job, but you didn't even hardly know what you were doing, and someone trained you, and you gained skills, and you gained comfort and familiarity. And now you've been at the same company for 10 years, and you're the person doing the training, and it's like nothing to it, right? That's the perspective of growth and learning. The same thing happens with your child. The first day they go to kindergarten, they're real nervous and they're kind of scared and they don't know if they're going to make friends, and they don't even know if they know everything they're supposed to know in kindergarten. By third grade they're reading, they're writing, they're doing multiplication and starting to do some fractions and division, and they can certainly add and subtract. And talk about a rapid learning curve. Little kids are astounding. They don't think of it. And so you might look at your child and say, I'm really impressed. I mean, super impressed. You know the things you've learned this year? Like what? Just kind of review it with them. Give them some perspective. Seriously, especially a child who's getting C's and D's, they're really working at it, but they have a disability, or they're maybe a little bit behind their peer group. And I know it's challenging for parents and they hate hearing this. Maybe they need to get held back a year so that they have time both emotionally and psychologically as well as educationally to catch up, so they're in a better peer group for them. That's not a crime, I want you to know. Sometimes it's the greatest thing you could ever do for a child. But even that C or D student who's kind of struggling, you can say to them, I remember the first day of school last year when you were so afraid, and now you have really good friends. You were really nervous, and I want you to look at all the things you've learned. You can count to 100 now. You know all your colors and all your shapes. You can even add simple numbers. You've done really great this year. I'm super proud of you. Give your child that perspective he or she might not have on their own. I'm going to use one with little girls that I really understand well. All right, so here's this little girl, and she's been going to dance classes for 8 years. And she's like, I'm terrible. I'm never going to be a ballerina. I'm not a really great dancer. And maybe she's not, but you can tell her. You remember what it was like when you first went? You had no sense of rhythm. You remember your first recital? You were tripping other people and falling over your own feet. And that was after a year, and you were really trying hard, but you weren't very good at all. And look at you now. At your last recital, you were beautiful and graceful. Yeah, you may not be the greatest dancer that ever lived, but look how far you've come. I'm so proud of you because you've really learned and you've gained a lot of skills. You may not be as skillful yet as you would like to be. And it's true, you may never be a prima ballerina, but you are a beautiful dancer, and I'm always proud of you, and I think you look so lovely when you're doing all of your moves. You give them perspective. You have a kid, and all his life, all he ever wanted to do was be an airplane pilot. And when he's 14 years old, suddenly he develops myopia, nearsightedness. He needs to wear glasses. And about a year later, he finds out on the internet that if you don't have 20/20 vision, you cannot be a pilot. And his world, every dream he ever had, falls apart. And you sit down with him and you say, I know how much you love airplanes. I know how much you've always loved airplanes and wanted to be a pilot. Do you know that there are alternatives? You don't need to be so despondent about this like it's the end of the world. You could become an airline designer. You could become an engineer. You could become a lot of things. Oh, and there is such a thing as LASIK. Now you have to wait till you're 21 or 22. It's recommended after your eyes are finished developing, and so are you. And then you can have LASIK, and they will allow you to still become a pilot. You give them perspective. There are things to do, but you also give them an honest perspective and say to them, even though that's what you've always wanted to do, maybe that isn't what you were designed to do. Maybe this is actually a way for you to think about other possibilities of things that you could do. And I understand how disappointed you are. I understand all about how frustrating and unfair it seems that your eyes are the one thing that are going to keep you from doing what you've always wanted to do. But you're going to be okay, and there are a lot of other things to do. You're a very talented, capable person, and let's find out some other things that you're interested in. Give them perspective. When you're a parent, you better have some perspective, okay? You can't expect a 3-year-old to act like a 20-year-old because they can't. They just can't. They don't have that kind of control over themselves, over their physical body. They're ungraceful and gangly. Just like I know a teenager at 13 years old who went from being 5'8" to 6'3" over a summer. Yeah, you don't grow 7 inches and be graceful. He was always tripping and knocking stuff off, and You're just gangly and not used to your own body yet. 3-year-olds are like that. They don't know all the things their body can do, and yet they're pretty strong now, and they're trying all this stuff, and they break things and they knock things over. They're not being ridiculous, or they're not going out of their way to mess things up. They are little. They don't have perfect coordination in their musculature yet. Perspective is, don't expect your kid to be more than he can possibly be. Learn what is normal and expected at a certain age. Then when your child knocks stuff off or breaks things or is uncoordinated, your perspective is, this is just normal stuff for a kid this age. Or they have this big meltdown in Walmart because of whatever. Oh, Mom, I really wanted that Speed Racer car. And you said it. No, they don't have control of their emotional state really well yet sometimes. And your perspective is, this is a little kid. Yeah, this is how little kids act sometimes. So instead of getting mad and bent out of shape and frustrated and they're making me so embarrassed and I look like a fool, it's more like, okay, this is how little kids act. It's not always acceptable and we're going to handle it, but this is how little kids act. All right. The other perspective is definitely true with teenagers. The perspective of any smart parent is that teenagers are going to fight for their independence. It's up to you how hard they need to fight. If you hand it to them on a silver platter, they're still going to fight you to an extent, but not to the extent they would have to if you're constantly trying to hang on to it and never allowing them any independence. Then they're going to fight you like this because you're the one with your hands balled up. Let it go. The perspective is, in a couple of years, they're going to be a young adult living on their own in a university setting with all kinds of stuff going on around them. And they need to learn how to handle life. So give them as much freedom and independence as you possibly can. That is the perspective of a wise parent who has trained their child, who still has open communications going on with their child, and they can allow them a little bit of freedom. That is perspective. Give the kid some room, okay? So my challenge question for the day is this. What is my personal perspective? Let me explain that to you. Is the world always out to get you? Are you always on the defensive? That's a perspective. Is the world a wonderful place and nothing ever goes wrong and everything is rosy? That's a perspective. Fascinating. I have 2 siblings, one with each perspective. You should hear them talk. It's hilarious. Just so you know. Wow, it's very fascinating. This Eeyore one and this, life is wonderful. And it's just really something to hear the 2 of them talk, especially because they grew through some similar childhood experiences, and you should hear their perspectives on that. My point being, your perspective colors your world. And it really colors your child's world. Because they're still developing their perspective, they often see the world through yours. So do what you can to give yourself a well-informed, well-balanced perspective. It's been great having you with me today on Paint a Beautiful Picture. I will look forward to being with you again soon. You may find additional information on our paintabeautifulpicture.com website. Additionally, you may watch me on Rumble, and you may also listen to a podcast on Buzzsprout or Spreaker, all under the name Paint a Beautiful Picture. If you like this video, please give me a thumbs up. You may subscribe, and if you are interested in receiving notifications, please hit the notifications button.